today's video, I'm just going to quickly show you how to find the acceptable maximum ISO rating of your camera. We're going to do this by just taking the exact same picture at all of the different ISO settings that the camera has to offer, and we're going to find what we deem is our most acceptable at that point. So let's just get started. Alright, so we're going to start off with the ISO at its absolute max setting. And we're also going to put our aperture at its max as well. So we're going to shoot this at f32. We're going to focus on our subject over there. And we're going to shut off autofocus just so the picture stays the same throughout. And I see my shadow in there, so I'm going to get down and try not to move. Alright, so we take that first picture, and I've got a timer on it so that I don't introduce any camera shake as we're doing this. Alright, and now we move our ISO down one and do the same process again. And we're going to do this for every single ISO. So for the settings I'm using, I have my camera set to aperture priority. That way I can just set my aperture at f32, which is a very tiny, very small opening. That way it will do all the work between, and I just have to change my ISO each stop I go, each picture I go, just so that I get the best possible results without taking too much time. When I first chose this spot, the sun was a little more prominent. Now it's hidden behind some clouds, so yeah. Okay, so I'm going to try to make this quick because honestly it looks like it's about to rain any second now. Alright, so starting with ISO L0.3, so this is low version. So looking at it at the regular view and then looking at it at 100% zoom, I don't see any noise at all. So this is acceptable. A lot of people will tell you not to use the low or the highs of your ISO setting because you're losing dynamic range or whatever reason for that. I'm not going to completely get into all that right now, but if using your base ISO you cannot achieve the settings you want, then go ahead and bump it down or bump it up or bump it where you need it to be in order for it to come out the best picture based on your settings. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll through this quickly and we're going to look at them. And once I start seeing too much ISO is when we're going to kind of stop and say that that's going to be my limitation. So we're at low 0.7, 1.0. Now we're at ISO 64, ISO 80, and I'm still not seeing any noise. ISO 100, ISO 125, ISO 160, ISO 200, ISO 250. And the reason we shot in brightness and in darkness, or at least tried to while the sun was still trying to work with us, that way you can kind of look at in the shadows and in the highlights to see where you're going to get the noise from. So 320, I'm still not really seeing anything. 400, 500, we're at 640 here, and then we're at 800, and that's actually pretty good for 800. We're at 1250 now, and still looking pretty good. 1600. I'm starting to see a little bit of noise in here, but it's still really not that bad. 2000, still not bad. Alright, we're at 3200, and you're starting to see a little bit more, but it's really still not that bad. 4000, 5000, 6400, 8000. See, I would probably stop no more than maybe, oh, we're going back, at 8,000 probably. Yeah, going higher, although even here at 100,000, it still looks pretty good. Nothing's horrible. Here we're at 160,000, and yeah, I would say this is probably more unacceptable, but it's not horrible. It's not like the worst you've seen. Here at 256,000. Now, once we're getting to the H's, this changes a little bit. So H 0.3, that's actually pretty noisy. I'm not a fan of that. 0.7, 1.0, and 2.0 is just horrible. That's probably the worst, and I think that was the last of them. So it pretty much just comes down to what you deem is acceptable. Where do you want to end your spectrum? Now, there are settings you can do in your camera to limit you from being able to exceed what you predetermine your end is. I'm not a fan of that. I just remember, hey, don't shoot above this. And here, I've never done the test with this camera before, but I'm going to say 8,000 ISO is not bad. I generally still stick with the base being 64, but you know, do what you want. It's really not bad at all. But that's been it for today. So happy shooting.